3 patterns for you to recognize so that you can reach fat loss success. Hello everyone, this is Health and Fitness Over 40. My name is Mark. Let's get into this week's video. This could be a really important video. If you've ever struggled with fat loss, and specifically if you've ever been on point with your nutrition and your exercising and your weight just isn't going down the way you would expect it to or the way you think it should. Many times people are on point with their nutrition, they're hitting their exercise hard, but the weight is just not going down. Often it will fluctuate up or it will spike up, and it won't go down as quickly as you think it should, and I want to tell you why. Just because your weight fluctuated upward or spiked upward, it doesn't mean you're gaining fat. Now, recently I've been posting a lot about my weight on Instagram. I'm in the middle of a fat loss phase. And I've seen and spoken about my weight spiking up even though I've been losing fat. And some of the comments have been, well, how do you know you're losing fat? How do you know that you're making progress if your weight isn't going down? Well, I'm going to speak about 3 really common patterns that I've found over the years in regard to weight loss spikes over time. And because the reality is, when you're measuring progress day to day, your weight will go up and down. But if you look at it over the long-term perspective, you'll see that even though there's spikes along the way, the trend is downwards. And that's what's really important to focus on. And I found 3 common weight loss trends that are the most common ways and the most common patterns in which people spike. And I'm going to break down each one specifically with you, so that you can see which pattern you fall into. And when you're losing fat and you end up spiking up or your weight isn't going down, you'll be able to see that your pattern is similar to reason A. So you don't lose motivation, so you don't get tricked into thinking you're not losing fat when you actually are. So you can stick with this for the long term and keep making progress. All right, so before we go into those patterns, I'm going to give some specific reasons why your weight fluctuates. Why it's seemingly random. Why it stays the same weight for a while and it just doesn't want to go down, and then you'll get a sudden drop and then you may spike up again. And of course this happening whilst you are hitting your nutrition, getting your nutrition right, and you're exercising, but it's just not going the way you expect it to. There are many reasons why. Many reasons why. So here let's talk about the 7 main reasons for this happening. And the first one is salt or sodium intake. And not just a lot of sodium intake, but an abnormally high amount for you. And this is all relative to the individual. And what happens is, if you eat more salt than you normally do in a given day, your body will hold on to water. That's what happens when you eat more salt than usual. Your body holds on to water. So you'll weigh more on the scale. But because you weigh more, that doesn't necessarily mean that you've gained fat. It just means that you're weighing more. And it's the same as if you held on to a bottle of water in your hand and then stepped on the scale. The scale would read higher. And on the other end of the spectrum, and this one we don't consider quite so often, is what happens when we eat less salt than normal. The next morning we might weigh less because you're not holding on to as much water as you normally do. So you have to be aware of this fluctuation downwards too. In this case, it's not fat, it is just that you've peed out more water. So that's sodium intake. Be aware. Another one is carbs. And again, if you eat more carbs than usual, your body will again hold on to more water because the carbs act like a sponge. So if you eat more carbs than normal, they'll soak up that extra water. And if you eat less carbs, you'll flush it out. You won't hold on to as much. And this is something that we really see in a ketogenic type diet or a low carb diet. We'll lose weight very rapidly because we remove carbs from the diet or almost remove them. It's not necessarily zero carb, but usually below 100 grams or less per day. And if you remove them or almost remove them, you're going to weigh less and you lose weight very quickly. But also very quickly what we see is this rate of loss comes to an abrupt halt. And that tends to be after 10 to 14 days usually. And within that time frame, we often see a 5, 10 or even a 15-pound weight loss. So we have to remember that the vast majority of this won't be fat. It will be water. It's glycogen and water. The carbs, as they're stored in the body, are stored as something called glycogen. And as the body uses this glycogen, it then flushes out the water with it. So it's not all fat loss. Just be aware. Next, if you eat late, if you eat much later than usual, and I am not saying that eating late is bad, and I'm not saying that eating late makes you fat. It doesn't. Your energy intake, your total calorie intake is what dictates fat loss and fat gain. Let's say, for example, you usually stop eating around 8 p.m. But one night you eat at 10:30 and you weigh in at the same time the next morning. Because you ate later, you will be more full. Not everything, or not as much, will have been digested. So you'll have more in you. And so when you weigh in early the next morning, when you weigh in the next morning, you'll weigh more. And similarly, if you weigh in earlier than usual, let's say usually you weigh at 8 a.m, but you have to get up early, you have to go to work early, you need to take a trip. So you wake up early and you weigh in at 5:30. You will have had less time to digest that food. And you won't have floated off that weight. And that's a term that tends to be used in weight control sports, floating off the weight. For now, we're going to bypass stress because I want to talk about that more in depth. And we're going to jump to this, the barbell. When we lift weight, our body breaks down muscles in a good way. Essentially, it's causing muscle damage. And when your muscles get damaged, they can uptake a lot of nutrients. They'll uptake glycogen, they'll uptake water. Again, that water thing. Which so often when we step on the scale, in the same way that the sponge takes in the water, our muscles will be doing the same thing. And along with it, the glycogen and the other nutrients. And will weigh more. That's why, especially after something like a heavy leg day, these big powerful muscles, they soak up lots and you'll weigh more the next day. And it's really important to keep that in mind. And then if you take a rest day, if you don't lift, you'll end up peeing out a lot and you'll weigh less. You'll weigh less the next day because you're not holding that water anymore. Yes, I'm overemphasizing that because that really matters. Now, stress. Okay, I really want to hammer this one home because it's a big one. And a lot of marketers really like to take advantage of people. They try to manipulate you into buying their programs or believing in their methods, because by hammering home on stress and talking about how, well, if you're stressed out, then you're going to gain fat. And that's why you need to do this specific diet or take a specific supplement because it eliminates stress. And first of all, stress isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's a normal reaction. We all go through stress. And many people talk about how cortisol is a stress hormone. And if cortisol is too high, you're going to be gaining fat. That is not accurate. And you don't gain fat from cortisol. You gain fat from eating too many calories. If you are very stressed and your cortisol is high, and you do end up stress eating as a result, then yes, you'll gain fat because you're eating too many calories. But it's not that stress is inherently bad for you, and it's not that cortisol is inherently bad for you. It's not. Actually, both can be very good, and we probably die without them. But it's managing them and understanding them. That's where the magic lies. So what happens with stress is when cortisol goes up, many times again, the body will hold on to water. It's a kind of defense mechanism. So we weigh more on the scale. And then as our stress levels go down, that water is lost. We let go of it. You weigh less and it looks like you lost fat. It's really water loss. In the same way that if you get really stressed, it looks like you gain fat, but you didn't. You're just holding on to water. A lot of people talk about reverse dieting, especially over the last 5 years or so, where they all of a sudden added calories back into their program and they lost weight. And they're like, well, how come when I added calories back, I lost weight? But when I was eating so few, I wasn't losing. It's because you were eating so few calories, your body was a bit stressed. It didn't want to let go of the water. And when you added some calories back, often carbs, your stress levels decreased. You peed out that water and then you weighed less. But it's not because eating fewer calories was making you gain fat or gain weight. All it was simply doing was holding on to a little bit of water. If you stayed eating the same amount of calories, you would have eventually dropped the weight. It just may have taken a little bit longer. Now, that's not to say that you need to eat very few calories, but to say that stress does not make you gain fat. Sometimes if the scale fluctuates up, it's just a sign that you're stressed. And the more you can calm down and relax, the sooner the weight is going to come off. Okay, so real quick, before we go to the next section, if your weight really spikes up one day or for a couple of days, it doesn't mean it's fat gain. And it's really important to remember that probably 95% of the time, it's coming from one of these 7 things. Look at your salt intake, your carb intake. Look at the times that you're eating, the times that you're weighing in. Examine your stress. Think about the last time you pooped. Think about your weight training schedule. If you had a heavy leg day, look at all of this, examine it, collect the data. Don't just jump to an emotional conclusion. Look at everything that's going on and then examine the facts. Because a lot of times, if you're definitely in a calorie deficit, these are probably one of the reasons why your weight's fluctuating. Okay, I want to outline what most people want and also why most people end up failing. When most people start trying to lose weight, getting that calorie deficit, they want their weight to do this every day. Yeah, this here. A nice, clean fat loss every day. Down, down, down. Do they expect that to happen? Logically, I don't think a single person would say yes. I think every single person would say, no, of course not. My weight won't go down every day. But then when it's practically happening each and every day, when they're on point with their nutrition, when they're on point with their exercise, when they're really all in it mentally, and they see that their weight isn't going down like this, they flip. They say, why isn't it happening? And if their friends said to them, hey, I'm trying to lose weight, but it's not going down every day. And they're logically like, listen, it's okay. That's what happens. But when they're doing it themselves, they freak out. And it's very important to be aware of this, because you have to treat yourself the way you would treat your friend. You have to look at your weight in the same way that you would look at your friend's weight. You have to look at all of the data, look at all the progress. Stop being an arse to yourself. Stop being judgmental. Stop letting your emotions dictate your actions, and look at everything critically and analytically. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to examine the most common weight loss trends. So when it's happening to you, you can look at it and you can see what's actually happening and know that you're not gaining fat. You're just in the process. Okay, so number 1. First, I want to say that this isn't the most common. I would say that all 3 of these are as common as each other. They are the 3 most common, and there are other trends outside of these. But you are more likely to fall into one of these 3 trends. This is how it looks here. What happens when someone enters a calorie deficit? When they first start, they'll see a quick weight loss. Here, quick loss. This quick loss could be over the course of 3 days, it could be over the course of a week. It differs from person to person. But they'll see quick weight loss followed by a stall. And from that stall, they'll see an increase in weight. And a lot of times here, where this increase is where people will give up. Let's say, for example, this downward part is the first week. They'll see weight loss for the first week. Maybe £3, maybe £5. And then on the 4th day, it will slow slightly. But then we hit this point and it spikes up and they gain £3 and they freak. And why is this happening? This increase in weight could happen over the course of 2, 3, 4 days. It doesn't necessarily have to be just over one day. And it is when they flip, like they say, this isn't working. And they quit. They give up. The people who succeed continue with their calorie deficit. They don't let this prevent them from keep going. And then whether it's a day or 2 days or 3 days or a week, bang, down again. Until they halt again and there's another increase. And again, this is where many people quit. It's easy to keep going when you're losing weight. When you hit that halt, that increase, that's where it becomes tough. Because you're not getting that external feedback of progress. That is when you have to keep going, when you have to stay with it. Don't let that increase make you give up. People rarely give up when the going is good, when they're getting that feedback. That's why you have to detach yourself from your emotions, from the scale, and not let this cause you to be either super excited or to cause you to get really hacked off and say stuff like, it's not working, stuff it. This is all part of the process, and this is a very common thing for us to see. People lose weight, they gain weight, they lose weight, they gain weight, all while being in a calorie deficit. And it's down to those 7 reasons we were talking about earlier. They are the things that cause these slight increases over time. Okay, number 2, another very common trend. What happens here is, rather than starting off with a quick weight loss, here there's almost nothing. Yeah, we get this straight line. Almost nothing happens at all. It stays relatively similar. Within that, there's a little bit of up, a little bit of down, yeah, and we just see small increments. But then the general trend is straight across. And then all of a sudden, we get a sharp drop. But then we get another straight line. And then another sharp drop. And these straight lines are where people quit. These areas here, which they think, well, I've plateaued. And they think, what supplements do I take? What exercises should I do to get out of this plateau? You don't need to add anything. You just need to keep doing what you're doing. Stay in a calorie deficit, strength train, keep doing it, stay in it. Just because you hit this plateau doesn't mean you need to change anything. If anything, it means you shouldn't change anything. You should stay consistent, because when you hit this plateau and you don't stay consistent, and then you say stuff it, and you start eating more and you stop exercising, you change stuff, that's when you stop making progress. These two are very, very common. So start tracking your data so that you can see if you fall into one of these. Right, now number three. Number three is a combination of the first two. Here, you see a quick weight loss followed by a spike and then a stagnation. And again, quick weight loss, spike, stagnation, plateau. Often you'll see. We'll just take this first drop out. So if you remove this first one, we have this flat line, and then it drops, and then it goes up, and then across, and then it drops. And this is really important. Lots of people have this one. These are the three most common ones. And anytime there's a spike or a stagnation, or a spike or a stagnation, or a spike or a stagnation, that's where people quit. That's where they say it's not working. And we should always ask, how do you know it's not working? Well, I'm plateaued. Well, for how long? When was the last time you lost weight? 2 days? 3 days? A week? 2 weeks? Cool, that's normal. You're not going to lose weight every single day. Weight loss is not a linear process. You won't lose it every week. If you lost a pound every single week for a year, you would lose 52 pounds at the end of the year. Now, not everyone has 52 pounds to lose. And it's easy to look at these Instagram transformations. Look, I lost 100 pounds in 3 months. And that's amazing. For those people, it's amazing. And congratulations to them. But that's not the norm. That's not 99% of us. Not to mention, and this is equally, if not more important, a lot of the people who lose that amount of weight that quickly, unfortunately, gain it back, and often more. And one thing that's really important to me is not how quickly you can lose the weight. It's how much weight you can lose and keep off for the rest of your life. And unfortunately, it's very common for people to use extreme methods, these very low calories, or completely eliminate carbs or through whatever it is, in order to lose the weight as quickly as possible. But unfortunately, they don't have an exit plan. They haven't planned what to do or how to transition out of their fat loss phase to a maintenance phase, if you will, a new lifestyle. The whole point of me doing this is to show you that weight fluctuations upwards are a part of the process. It's not necessarily fat gain. It's not that you're not making progress. It's not that it's not working. It's that it's just what happens. And as long as you stay consistent and as long as you don't give up, you will succeed. It's inevitable. You just can't quit here. You can't quit on the drop or on the stagnation and on the slight rise. You cannot quit there. Be consistent, because as long as you don't quit, you will win. I promise you. Now, if you've liked this video, please give it a like. Hit subscribe. Hit the bell to get notified. Thank you. Another video coming soon.